Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to be talking today about behavioral activation therapy. That is an approach that is within the cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. CBT is quite effective for lots of different behavioral issues. The behavioral activation therapy also is effective, especially for depression, anxiety. But one of the great things about activation therapy is that it works well with whether you're doing in person, telehealth, whether you're male or female, whether you're young or old. This approach is grounded in the understanding that emotions can be difficult to change. So the therapist is working more on fostering a meaningful activity that then changes the emotions. So rather than trying to change the emotion, you are trying to change the activities, which will change the emotion. The important part of this is not only, like I said, his research shown that this works kind of as an across-the-board thing, but it also has shown that one of the things that makes this effective is the relationship, the therapeutic relationship between the therapist and the client. So you have to make sure that that client trusts you. The other thing also is, or another thing also is that you need to make sure that the client realizes that this activation therapy is in their hands, what the activity is, and you have to make sure that they get that there is no pressure in this, that this is all about working on their level. So you really have to be willing to meet them where they are. So if you have someone that isn't showering, barely eating, barely drinking, and laying in the bed all the time, you have to meet that person where they are. Even if that just means sitting up on the edge of the bed and eating a sandwich and chips, then that's where they are. So make sure that the activity meets the client where they are. So for the sake of this particular situation, for confidentiality reasons, we will not be talking about names, but our client is in her late 20s. She is from South America. Her and her husband had one child when they came here. They also brought her mother. A few months ago, the mother was diagnosed with late stage metastatic breast cancer. And since they have been in the United States the last 6 years, they have since had 2 more children. So the client, her husband, have 3 children total, and her mother came with her. Now, the reason that is important to know is her mother's death not only is devastating because that is her mother, and of course she loves her mother, but this person became a huge support system to the client, not only in helping care for her 3 children, but also because her husband works out of town. And so she was that adult that, was there for her and gave her, adult conversation that we all need. So her death was very devastating to the client. And to start with, she kind of convinced herself that her mother would go into remission. So although you might think that this was something that would be expected, it was very much not expected for the client. So after doing the initial assessment, the psychosocial assessment, the second visit is when we put this behavioral activation therapy. That's where we talked about it. One thing was at the end of the first session, I made the suggestion that she possibly ask her husband to spend some time at home, and maybe that would help. Well, it turned out that she did, and he was able to, and they were able to spend some time as a family. And because that really helped her mood, you could actively see that she was somewhat better than she was last time. Like her, she did not cover her face so much. Her expressions were a little bit more so. She still was obviously depressed, but a little bit better. So I really felt strongly that the behavioral activation therapy was going to be exactly what was needed in this situation. So so what we did was we gave her the opportunity to come up with 3 suggestions. We narrowed that down to 1. That 1 became journaling. We made sure we repeatedly went over that there was no pressure. She needed to do this at the time of day she wanted, and she needed to do it as often as she wanted. We went over how to put the information in the activation log, noting that it needed to have the day, the time of day. It didn't need to be specific, just, morning, afternoon, night. And that beforehand, she needed to note what her mood was from a 0 to 10, 0 being, can't get out of the bed, 10 being, doesn't feel depressed at all. And then after the activity and what that. So that is a very important aspect of this, because you can't quantify if this is working if you don't have that data. We made sure that she understood that. Again, we several times went over that she needed to not put pressure on herself to do this. So after talking about the different possibilities, narrowing it down to the 1, and we had gone over everything, we felt very confident. She felt very confident that she had chosen one she could carry out. And as a whole, I felt very confident that this was going to be effective because what we had already done. And we also made sure that we set a day and a time to get back together. Of course, on telehealth again. That is very important also, because you need to be frequently touching base to see if this is being effective. And hopefully the result will be that it is. But what you need to think about is, when you get back together in a week, does it need to be tweaked? Also, an important aspect of this is making sure that you give the client that credit for. Make sure you're giving them plenty of, good jobs. But whether they did it once, whether they did it every day, whether they didn't do it at all, even if they didn't do it at all, you still want to make sure that you are saying to them that how brave they are for even thinking about trying it. So make sure that you're giving them that adoration. It's very important for them to want to continue with this. I also caution that if it doesn't seem to be being effective at first, make sure that you are tweaking it. You need to make sure that the activity is something that's going to be meaningful, because if it's not meaningful to them, it's not going to have a lot of impact. And so if it's not something that's meaningful after you have tried for a couple of weeks, make sure that you are changing it. See if you can find something else that would be more meaningful. And then go from there. This is meant to be a measured time amount. Like, this is not something that we should be going on for a year. But that level of time, it depends on the client also. It depends on how well they're able to engage with this, or how much you have to help them engage with this. So as a quick summary, the high points in this is make sure that you have that therapeutic relationship before you are doing behavioral activation therapy. Make sure that you are picking something that's meaningful. Make sure that it is something that is achievable, and make sure that they know how to do that log so that you have that data of how, so that you can see how that is going. In this case, I really felt it was important to give the client, let them choose 3 possible activities and narrow it down to 1, so that they weren't necessarily just the first thing that they thought of was the thing that they wanted to do. I feel like that it's important for them to be able to kind of come up with a few ideas and then narrow down to 1. But that's a little bit just my way of doing it. And at this point in the presentation, I would open up to questions. Please feel free to make any comments or have any questions in the comments section, and I will try to get back to everyone with answers. Thank you so